Welcome to another episode of the Dealmakers Chronicles. Today we have Mr. Tommy Giannopoulos, a dear friend of ours who we've been doing a lot of business with. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey guys, happy to be here with you.
Thank you for coming on. I know it's in the world of development and especially your specific part of development construction is crazy busy, but thank you for carving out the time for us.
It's nice to take a little break, so I'm not complaining.
So, Tommy, tell us how you got into real estate. You've been with King's Capital. We had a conversation with George and Jeff before. We'd like to know your backstory. Take us to the beginning, to when you first gained your consciousness.
Consciousness. Well, my consciousness in real estate. So my brother George, that you guys already interviewed, he and I started a rental company. So we were just the two of us, small little office in Brooklyn. My dad actually, he has a flower shop, and we worked there, and then we decided to start this little company. And we were just getting any listings that we could get our hands on, running around, renting apartments. Slowly over time, we started to do a sale here and there, but it was really like a boutique little rental office that we did for, I don't know, 8 to 10 years. But we always had like our eye like on owning and developing. I don't think we ever thought that we'd be developing to the extent that we are today, but eventually it took us a couple of years to do our first one. I think that was the hardest one, is just getting over kind of like that initial fear. And then we just kind of put our life savings into the first one. And then we partnered with our other partners, Jeff, who you already interviewed, and Richard. And we basically just kind of learned on the fly a little bit. We didn't have, really the education for it. Like, we were in real estate. I felt like my background in rentals and sales was helpful to get into the mind of apartments, but never dove into construction, selling a building that I own, any of that. Like value creation, that's something we just figured it out. And we could have done better, but looking back, it happened exactly the way it was supposed to. It was like school on the fly. Thankfully, we didn't lose any money. And that just slowly, grew to 2, then 3, and eventually we branched out and brought in investors. Now we have some bigger projects, thank God. Looking forward to keeping it going.
So, in every company, whether it's development or manufacturing, whatever the case may be, in King's Capital, how did you assume your loan? Was it a natural transition, or is it something that you were pushed into? Because you mentioned something where you now take care of leasing, you take care of construction. So how did your role come about for this company? Is it something that you naturally gravitated towards to because of your prior skills, or is it something that you always wanted to be a part of?
It's a good question. So, the 4 of us, we came in, and I don't think we knew exactly how to do it, right? Like, we just knew that we wanted to do it. And I think over time, we sort of naturally fell into certain roles that naturally felt aligned. For me, it always felt like I always gravitated towards more on the creative side. Development, like the numbers have to make sense. And, we spend a lot of time in spreadsheets, but I try to live outside the spreadsheet as much as I can. And I always enjoyed being on site, being out. That, to me, I wanted to do that. Having the experience in the rentals, I felt like at least gave me a good starting position to be like, okay, what would make sense here? What is the renter looking for? Because I had that experience of, okay, this worked and this didn't. So using some of that in that initial stages, I definitely think helped. And the construction part of it allowed me to kind of get into a little more of the creative side of making something. So, for everybody else, I think they also gravitated to their own skills, the financial aspects. And for me, it was that.
Very nice.
Very nice. So when it comes to construction, it was a brand new skill that you had to learn. Tell us about some of the growing pains, because we've been part of most of your projects at this point. Take us through your initial projects where you're kind of learning on the fly to now where you have a team of GCs that you've worked with before, you're bidding them, you have a designer, you have a team. Take us through the growing pains of the initial projects, because I think most people would want to hear about the pains and misery of the initial projects.
Funny because I'll be honest, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just doing what I felt like the end user would like. You always have to keep the budget in mind. Like, there's no denying it, but I think, You just try to make something you think is going to work here. Growing pains, there was a lot. Because we had used our life savings, everything was on a budget. So even the teams and the materials, a lot of that was really budget conscious, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think anyone starting out, that's a good part. That's a good place to start, is sort of that budgetary angle. But budget doesn't mean it has to look or feel like it's on a budget. So making choices that look and feel good, but don't cost you an arm and a leg. So, I mean, for us, we didn't have the budget to go out there and get the biggest GC or the biggest architect. We didn't have any designers. So we started out with much smaller teams. We don't have the type of infrastructure that, say, a major GC would, building a high rise or even a small building. So it was really an informal sort of process. And a lot of times that came with some headaches, a lot of management over these teams and things not going exactly how you want, schedules being missed and dragging. And we had one job where, we went a little over budget, but we worked it out. And it was just really just kind of pivoting on the fly. Like it really was like a school, like on the fly.
So the project that you're talking about going over budget, is that the Fulton project where when the walls came down, you guys saw what horrors were
Yeah,
behind the walls?
that's the one. So that project was one of the earlier ones. I think that one was, trying to count it. It was like about a number four in the pipeline. Like we focused on one area. We were familiar with this one area. It was in Ocean Hill, East Bed-Stuy. And at that time, a lot of people didn't want to be there. But we looked at it and said, we're on the border of this. They're doing really well over here. We can take advantage of this pocket. And what we managed to do in that pocket is we delivered a nicer product. So the people who would spend the money, to live in the quote better, nicer neighborhood, they came and spent the same to have a nicer home. So that was our strategy for that. Fulton Street, that one was intended to be a light renovation. We considered doing all new apartments. We reconfigured them to what we thought would be best. And like you said, we opened up the walls and you couldn't keep a thing. And so a light renovation turned into basically building an entirely new building within an existing building. We had to do foundation work, a complete new structural reinforcement of the entire building, all new joists throughout the building, new roof. The entire facade was removed from the rear. We had to rebuild the fire escape. A lot of expenses and a big hit in the schedule. So that one was stressful. But what we managed to do is, like I said, just learning on the fly. We were looking at the floor plans. How can we make up for some of this? And we had 2 bedrooms, and we were able to look at it and say, okay, let's pivot to 3s. They'd be smaller, but they'd be 3 bedrooms. And thankfully, they did really, really well. They crushed the original projections that we had, and it did make up for a lot of that, and then some, so it worked out. And now what was a nightmare then is one of our better cash flowing properties now.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible how you have such a big change order where you go from light cosmetic to pretty much changing joists and beams and still make the deal work financially. I think it kind of attributes to how conservative you guys are in your underwriting to begin with. In looking at new deals now, at what point do you get involved?
It depends. It depends on the deal. A lot of the guys have a familiarity now with, looking at deals and underwriting them. If it's something that we've seen before, they have a lot of that knowledge, from past experience. Some projects, where we're looking to do different things, bigger things. So it depends it depends what it is. But generally, I'll get involved to see either, hey, do you need some price guidance here? Do you need timing guidance here? What can we do here? What's the best way of looking at this? Or they're giving me, if they've done the underwriting already, they're bringing it to me and just saying, hey, Tommy, like I have this deal I'm looking at. Can we go through the numbers? We go through it and basically verifying or adjusting what they have. We're just kind of running through it from scratch from my angle. There's different filters we have to pass through, architect and making sure that we can do what we want to do there. And so now they know to do that and they go through that themselves. But it really depends. It really depends. In some projects, I like to come in fresh, through a walkthrough. There hasn't been any due diligence or anything done. So it varies.
So when it comes to, New York City developments and real estate just in general, it's very competitive. So I've seen on your deals, one of the ways you guys are able to outmaneuver your competition or, win that property is by looking at the property very differently, whether it's changing the layouts, whether it's changing the amount of units. When you're doing that walkthrough, is it during that walkthrough that you're seeing the potential of the building that is different than what everybody else is seeing? Or how does that vision that you see in the building, what the end product is going to be, how you're going to be able to underwrite it very differently than others that will give you a competitive edge to be able to, okay, fine, overpay for the property, but you know that the layouts or the configurations or the way you're going to turn the project into is going to pay back at the back end?
I can't speak on the competitors and how they do it. I definitely have learned a lot from seeing what other giants have done, and we've taken a lot of that and we've made it our own. Oh, this looks great. This worked great there. We can do this, but it's this version. So I think for us, we do really focus on what is the highest and best use here, and we do to this point a really good job of squeezing that value out. I think during our walkthrough, we're doing a couple of things. We're looking at what might be if there's any major capital expenditures to keep an eye on. Is this just a rehab, or are there any major items that we need to make sure that we're accounting for? You're looking at it from a build out perspective. What floor plan would work here? Can I do twos? Can I do threes? Can I do two bathrooms? There's different things that I value, bedrooms, bathrooms. Air and light requirements, views. We're looking at all of that. We're trying to visualize as best we can the end product. So when we're literally measuring the space out. So that helps, and we get a rough idea on the spot. But then we spend time looking at those measurements and actually putting pen to paper and saying, what can we do here, and schematically doing like a loose idea of that. And then just kind of walking through that and loosely in on set. Someone walks in here, their bedroom is here, the bathroom is there. It takes a little bit of, at this point, in the beginning, I didn't have that as good as I do now. So having that experience now, that helps.
So when you go inside of a vacant building now, or even if it's partially occupied, just by walking it, and for some of the people who may not know, you go into these properties, the conditions is very bad, especially the ones that you guys like to take on. And you see these specific layouts, and typically a person's mind goes to, okay, if I do cosmetics, this is what it'll look like. But what you guys do, you pretty much take down all the walls on the entire floor, reconfigure the entire layouts. And I would assume it takes a lot of knowledge behind this wall I can take down. This is a weight bearing wall. This is not. Do you do all that at your walkthrough, or do you go back to your office, you pull previous DOB plans to kind of get an idea of what you can do there? Do you get advice from an architect that can tell you, okay, this is what we can move, what we can't? How do you almost reconstruct the entire space, taking away from this unit, adding it to that one, duplexing? How does that math happen in your head? How do you envision these things from just walking the property?
I mean, so it's really all of that. It's going there and getting an understanding of what you can do. And we have the experience, but what I would say, and again, I'm speaking from experience now, but I didn't always have it, it really, really helps to have good teams. So having an architect who can answer questions, having a GC, you can bounce things off of. If I'm really unsure about a particular site, bringing the GC in there and walking with him, you're not always going to, get everything. There might be things that you want, him to get his particular set of eyes on. Again, this would be a GC you're comfortable with. For someone who doesn't have that, it might require having a few GCs walk it with them. We have a good idea of what is load bearing now, what's not. If there's any major items, like let's say it's a structural component, we tend to look. We will rely on the specialist. We do have the GC, like I said, but then if it's really, really intensive, we'll reach out and speak to a structural engineer. It really depends what's needed. It's project to project. And we will even look at previous plans. A lot of the times you don't have it, but you try to get them, and when you don't, your architect can go. We use our architect. You don't have to, but you can go down there and pull old plans and see what's there. It's really just like a puzzle. So everyone has some piece of information to add to the puzzle. It doesn't happen in a single walkthrough or a single day. It's just, you're looking at it and like you wake up the next day and you have like a different angle or something that you just thought of. And it's just it's part of that process of putting the puzzles together. What can I do here? What's the best way of looking at it? And that tends to evolve over the course of not just the due diligence, but even after we close. Like, wow, we have a new angle now that we could use. It just keeps flowing. We're not fixed on a particular idea, so we're pretty we're pretty moldable as far as what we'd be willing to do if it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely does. Being fluid in terms of the designs and evolving throughout the process, I think is very important, especially when things change, right? Whether when you start a building and you're thinking, okay, 2, 3 bedrooms is the way to go, but then you're starting to see that the 1 bedrooms are renting out better. Maybe we should add a little bit more 1 bedrooms. So before you actually file those plans, or even after you file those plans, I've seen you guys file amendments, right? Adding certain things or taking things away is very important. With that being said, what is the most recent headache that you had on one of your most recent projects? Something that really pushed you, I don't want to say over the edge because thankfully you're here and you haven't fallen over the edge, but something that really pushed your buttons and you said, wow, this is something that like no matter how many deals I do, how many projects I do, how many construction sites I've been on, something always new comes out and this is something that came up most recently.
So, working in New York City, you're dealing with, you need to deal with the city and the Department of Buildings, and you pulling permits and you're doing all those things, and we did all those things right. A recent project, there was an old filing from the previous owner, and my GC, God bless him, something's great, and he mistakenly pulled the old plans. You pull the old plans, now you have to get that signed up. But when we were complete with the project, we're all done. This came to light a bit late, so now we had to adjust and going through the process of that, taking over that filing and getting it signed up. That ended up delaying such a small thing, just a small oversight, and not to blame them. We could have picked up on it earlier ourselves. It delayed the project, so it's really just now from that I take different, like a lesson learned, right? Like I learned something. Next project, it's never going to happen again. I'll tell you that. But it's just things that you try to think of everything and you won't. So that was one experience. It's a small thing, but it ended up being a costly thing. But I think it's going to work out very well.
And out of the developer, because you mentioned a lot of things that you do before you even submit an offer. A majority of the business plan in understanding if the deal is going to work constitutes you getting an architect in there, kind of getting a price from him, having a few GCs walk it. What would you say is one issue that most developers seem to underestimate? What is one thing that you would say a less experienced developer would look past and really get hurt on?
Probably not being conservative enough. I think starting out, even now, like depending on the project, like the level of cushioning we'll put really depends on the project. So if I think there's a lot of unknowns, I will definitely do my best to try to account for that and be more conservative. I think starting out, I think you really need to be conservative in your budgeting, in your projections, and what you think you're going to rent or sell for, in your timing, and also I think the biggest thing is just expect that it's not going to go perfect. I think in the beginning, like I don't think I was used to so many things going wrong on a job site, and it's like different things, right? And not becoming too attached to that one particular problem or challenge. I think that comes, with experience as well. But just going into it, I think having the expectation, like, okay, I'm going to do this, and it's not going to go perfectly, and that's okay. And things are going to come up, and we're going to adjust, and baking that into the pie a little bit, with your conservative projections helps a lot. If you really want to, and the best way that I've found to offset some of that risk is really surrounding yourself with the best people, the best teams. So it'd be worth it, I would say, to bake into your pie starting out a really good architect, a really good GC. These are people who are going to cover your mistakes, and if you can lean on them or rely on them, you're going to have a better time. And, that was something that we tried different architects and we've tried different GCs, and you don't always, have the perfect fit, but you do your due diligence. I like to rely on referrals. I like to know that someone came from someone that I know and that they trust them and they did a good job. You do your best to look into them and what projects have you done. And if it's a GC, go on site and look, go see it, go to their office. Do your best to pick good teams and minimize your exposure.
It's very interesting. You mentioned DOB, and I think every person who builds, buys anything in real estate, when you're dealing with a DOB and you're having a lunch and you get that phone call or text message from a GC saying that an inspector is on site and there's a stop work order, that appetite dies really quick and you run to that site very quickly.
Yeah, look, the DOB is our friend. They're our friends.
Yes, we keep telling that to him.
Our friends, and their
If they're
job is to
watching
make
this, we love you. We do.
It's true. I mean, they're there for a good measure to protect. And, I think fortunately though, in New York City in particular, there's so much red tape where it ends up just grinding things down where sometimes it's warranted and many times it's not. So, it's just part of the game, just part of adjusting and understanding, like, this is what you have to expect and work with, and don't expect everything to go 100%.
Yeah, this is like I love this conversation because it shows the other side of development. Because oftentimes when you speak to a developer who's working on getting the deals done, pushing the boundaries, they're overly optimistic, and oftentimes the optimism can lead to a lot of mistakes, a lot of cracks in the foundation. And there's always somebody like you in the background or alongside them that says, "Hey, let's put the brakes on this. Let's minimize the risk. Let's mitigate our exposure." And it is crucial. And I think a lot of people don't understand is that you need two parts to the equation. A lot of people bit off more than they can chew in development, and it is extremely easy to get hurt. Right? On a $10 million project, you put in $3.5 million in equity, $6.5 million in debt, and God forbid you increased your rent projections by 5%, you underestimated your construction budget by even 8-10%, and you're underwater. So to be conservative, like you're describing, and I see how meticulous you are in paying attention to like the slightest things, being conservative on absolutely everything, and that property on Fulton is a good attestation to that. So how you guys didn't see fire damage and were still able to come out on top. It's a very nice dynamic, very interesting, and I hope every developer understands that there's two parts to this equation.
Yeah, especially new developers.
Yeah, yeah, and in my office, I don't know how the guys feel, but I kill a lot of deals because I'm like, no way, guys, no way.
We kill some of your deals as well through the strenuous process.
Oh, listen, pushback is good because it makes you think, and you need different opinions. You can't if everyone's has the same opinion, it's not necessarily a good thing because you need contrasting views and like, I think it creates a balance. But I'm a little more on the conservative side. Other guys a little more on the optimistic side, let's call it. And we sort of but we counterweight each other, and ideally that makes a good deal.
So tell me about some of your process because now you're no longer at the stage where you're doing one project at a time, right? You have multiple projects that you're managing. You're managing vendors, GCs, deliveries. What are some of the processes that you came up with, the employees that are helping you? How is it different now versus when you were just managing one project?
Right. So I don't think we thought we would be at this stage, when we first started. And now that we started out with one project, it was one project for many, many years, and that was manageable. And now we have multiple projects, and we've had to make some adjustments. And with that, I think, again, I keep pointing to teams, but having good teams really, really saves you a lot of trouble. So having the right architect, having the right GC, designer. We have a great relationship with the designer that you guys interviewed, Mr. Llanos, who's phenomenal. We have good synergy. So having good synergy with your people, with your designer, with your GC, with your architect, your brokers, they're going to help you, create a system where we're looking at multiple projects. They tend to be in the same area. So one thing that we started doing, instead of making each project exactly the same, which is fun, but It's, when you are trying to do multiple projects, it's not so easy. So one thing that we've changed now that we didn't used to do is using a lot of the same materials, buying those in bulk. A lot of the same finishes and designs. Again, assuming it works, we pay attention to market trends. We'll change that if we need to. But if it works here and a couple blocks away, it'll work as well. So optimizing your procurement, your buying, your GC has a familiarity with your product. There's less questions, and there's a certain expectation on the quality and everything. So again, going back to teams, they get used to what you want and helping you get that. But even now, we're going through another change, expanding the systems. We want to bring in more people. We want to create more layers in between myself and different jobs. So bringing in someone who is a really like an owner rep with that construction background, creating more layers in between, from myself down to in the field. So I love to be on site, but it's hard to be on site when you're expanding and you're trying to do things, or you have to do things in the office. So creating additional layers of competent people in between, giving them responsibility and letting them make a lot of those day-to-day decisions, I think helps a lot. The vendors, well, they know what to expect. Putting that on the GC, for example, helps trying to make things as efficiently as possible. For us, it's fluid. It's where I wouldn't say that we're at the point where we have this supreme system in place, but we're in the transition right now where that's expanding in the field and also on the back end of it.
You mentioned building, you have good teams, and I think you have that internally within King's Capital. You guys have great people working for you. And I think you also mentioned having the right GC, the right vendors, the right designer. I never heard of a scary story coming from you guys where you hired a GC and you got screwed. I feel like you either have a very good experience with a tradesperson or a mediocre one where you don't really get hurt. Is there a specific process you use in evaluating different vendors and if they'll be a good fit to fit your team? Because everything seems like it's flowing extremely well. But before you build all these connections, before you meet Janos, before you meet your contractors, before you meet your architects, you don't know anybody. And there's a lot of them everywhere. So how did you figure out these guys are a good fit for what we're trying to accomplish?
Good question. So it wasn't, it wasn't the case for us in the beginning, where the truth is we did have times where got the short end of it from a GC or an architect, and it's not like they left us hanging, but if a project was supposed to take a certain amount of time, it took much longer. I think I could tell you one particular instance, for example, when I chose this particular GC at the time, I knew that they did great work. I'd seen it, and I thought that would be enough. But for this GC to do, let's say I think it was a 3-unit and a 6-unit project that we did with them. They were used to homes, and this wasn't something that they used to do. It wasn't their bread and butter, and they had their own challenges. And so, I mistakenly put the piece in the wrong part of the puzzle. And while it worked out, having the right GC to put there who's more experienced in, say, multifamily, who has the type of infrastructure to give you the quality, speed, pricing that you need. For us, there was a lot of trial and error, but I would say for someone who doesn't have any of this starting out, really do your due diligence. Go speak to a lot of different people. You'll learn different things from different people. Speak to 10 GCs, at least, and go see their work. Go see their office, ask for their portfolio, ask a lot of questions. How long did it take? Do your best to that. If you can get it through a referral, even better. The same with I forget if I mentioned it before, but if you're budgeting, spend a little more. Be willing to spend a little more to start on these particular things, architect and GC. Like you mentioned, Janos, we didn't have that. So I actually think, looking back, I would have started with a designer even early on. It's an expense. I think a lot of people would say they don't need right now. I'm starting out, I don't need it. But again, a lot of these people, they're professionals, and they're going to their intent is to deliver you a better product, right? Something that the renter or buyer is going to love. That's the whole reason they're there. And B, they have the experience as well. So it's another angle, and they have their own contacts that they could be yours as well. So you're going through the vetting and referral process with that as well. I would say if someone can swing the extra investment, get a designer who's connected and can provide those things for you and give you a good starting.
Do you recall the first project where you guys brought in a designer?
Yep, it was our first project in Manhattan in Little Italy, and I don't even remember the thought process as to why. I think if I had to guess why how I got there, I remember being excited that it was our first Manhattan project and that I wanted to deliver something that was like special. Like I wanted it to be not just nice, but I wanted it to almost like make a statement in a way, like we're here. And I wanted it to be not just the nicest apartments on the block, but in the neighborhood. And I felt bringing in a designer would help a lot, and it did. And we weren't working with Janos at the time, but the designer we did work with, he did a great job. And he helped everything from apartment design, lobby design. We didn't have the space for amenities, but we were thinking of ways to do amenities and trying to add value that way. We did a little package room, which it wasn't a package room, it was a package locker. Sorry, I was really proud of that. We did. It was not common. It was an expensive item, but I looked at different ways that I thought would add value, and that was one of them. And we had like a beautiful courtyard that he designed, beautiful mural. So it was really fun.
Did you get any pushback from your partners where you say, hey, these are our expenses, where we used to see these expenses. Yeah, let's add one more line item. It's interior designer. I want things to look pretty. Like, did you get any pushback, or everybody kind of said,
No.
oh, yeah, this makes sense right away?
So to their credit, they let me do what I want for the most part. They trust me, I should say. Not that they let me do what I want, but they trust me enough that if I'm making a decision, it's for the best interest. Again, while I may have the final say, there's a lot of conversations that may go into a particular decision, leaning on different people, even talking to them internally. I think, when it comes down to it, I think we have built something where we trust each other in what we do. And for me, it's this. And thankfully, they haven't really pushed back on too much on anything, any one particular thing. But, we're looking at different things now, bigger things, and hopefully one day it'll be something like really, really, really nice and larger than what we've done. And I might say, hey, I really think we should do this. And they might be like, you're crazy.
So let me dig a little bit deeper for the viewers out there, and because I know you on a friend level as well, and there were times when I walked into the office and you would be selecting a lamp for the lobby for over a day. You would have 20 different tabs of different lamps, and you're very meticulous for every single detail. And that comes from your personal life that I saw when it comes to the way you go to the gym, and meticulous when you were weighing your food at the table with a scale. Were you always Yep, that's right. If anybody needs to know, Tommy is a monster at the gym. Were you born that way when you're so meticulous and neat and careful with everything? Or is it something that you developed into?
Honestly, for better or worse, this is the way I am.
Okay.
Like, it's like a gift and a curse, I guess, because should I really be looking at 20 different lamps? Should I spend a day picking a lamp? Probably not. It's probably better use of my time. But, at the end of it, I'm picking the lamp, I guess, that I think is really, really people are really going to love it. So I'm sure I could be doing things better as far as that goes, but I think it's what helps me too is just really caring about each choice.
Yeah, and I think that that's what I wanted to bring out in that question is you care about every little thing that most people would just pass through without noticing. You pay attention to, and you think about the renter's experience, or whether it's condo sales, the person buying the apartment, is their experience as they're walking through the hallway, as they're opening up the front door, as they're walking in, and how the light is hitting them, right? And always adapting and changing. And it's very particular to you that most people don't, because it is a lot of time and effort to pay attention to those things, right? But you do put that time and effort, even with having a designer and having GCs and everything like that. You still have that eye and time for those specific details.
And I actually do remember those days where we walk in your office and we literally see George snap. How much can you be looking at the lamp? I remember that visual as if I was there yesterday.
Which lamp it was. Like, I want to go find the lamp now that we ended up getting and just see, like, was it right?
If I'm not mistaken, it was for the Fulton project. If I'm not mistaken, it was for the Fulton project, and I think George was just,
Look, I think I got a little better at that. That it won't take me a day anymore. And
Yes.
it's actually, because I had this conversation even today with someone here in my office. We're looking at a particular project, right? And we're looking at different scenarios, and it's like, oh, but this scenario, this looks like, it's going to maximize the value. But that is it's a bigger lift. It's going to take longer. So looking at it, like, it doesn't have to be the absolute best scenario sometimes, but the one that keeps things moving. That's something I think I've learned since then, is even if it's not the best choice, sometimes it's making the choice in a timely manner to keep the project moving. So that's I still look at a lot of lamps, some now it might be something else, but yeah, I think what I've learned is, sometimes it's better to make a decision and go a particular direction than spend too long in one place and drag it.
But one thing I would say is every time I see a King's Capital building, I feel like you guys push the boundary of the rents you're getting within that area. So whatever you're doing, it's working, and the renters are okay overpaying. It's just your properties do look different. And in New York, one thing you notice is everybody's so budget constrained, and developers are trying to squeeze every single dollar out of the deal. And it's not easy to make deals work. It's not that these are bad people, but you go into properties and you see they're all dull, they don't look pretty. You know, the person who was designing it did not put his heart and soul into it. And in your properties, you see it. The people may not know you, but they do see your reflection in everything, in the little designs and everything. So a huge testament to that.
I appreciate that, you guys. I think it's, like I said, I definitely care. I definitely care. And yeah, what I was going to say, I wanted to answer you specifically about something, but yeah, the truth is I care. And right, what I wanted to tell you is that, again, just the spreadsheets, right? Like, at the end of the day, it has to make financial sense, but there are definitely times where I will say, let's spend more, right? Like, instead of this finish, let's do that one, because I try as much as possible to focus on the experience. Like, if you ask me what I do, like, I really try to focus on the experience of our product, which is homes, right? So having that experience that I had as a rental broker really helped me. So how do they feel walking in? I want them to feel proud of where they live. I want them to, if they have a hard day, they come home, they would love to be at their home. That in turn, and then having a product that we could be proud of as a company, or our investors can be proud of. Like, oh, I'm in this deal. Like, it's just, sometimes it doesn't add a dollar to the rent, right? But you are doing something there where someone who loves where they live, for example, in a rental, they might stay longer. You'll have less turnover.
Yeah, absolutely. Transitioning now a little bit more on the construction side and balancing the budget, right? We keep talking about the Excel spreadsheet and balancing the budget. And a lot of times these projects take a year. Some of the bigger ones, it takes a little bit longer than that. What do you do when you are underwriting materials for X? And then by the time you actually order it, it's X plus double because prices went up. How do you look at that? How do you prepare that for yourself?
I mean, that's never happened. It's not as a double, right? That's,
I'm just trying to be as extreme as possible here, but just
are there some, there's some, hey, I thought it was going to cost X, and now I'm in the deal and we're ready to go, and oh, it's actually not going to cost X. It's going to cost X plus 5, 10, whatever, right? I think going back to having that conservative basis really, really helps. I think keeping the conversation flowing with GCs and vendors, getting an understanding of pricing and trends. Just you're trying to do as much of your homework as possible. So, it's happened where things have been a little more expensive, but thankfully, like, you know, we've really done a pretty good job of being conservative enough where even with that, on a particular project where things were over, even we had change orders, we still came in under budget for the actual entirety of the project. So it may have been more in a few places, but we were smart enough at the time where we had some cushions and we completed the project and we were still able to even come in under budget.
let me ask you on that specific topic. When you're speaking to vendors right now and GCs with the uncertainty that's out there in the market, right? Not knowing how much materials are going to cost because of tariffs and etc. Are they quoting you saying that, okay, this is the price, but depending on what happens in the next 2-3 months, that even though I quoted you this and we have a contract, the price might be different? Are you hearing that at all, or is something that we haven't reached yet?
I don't think anyone knows what's going to happen. I think everyone's a little bit on a wait and see. I've had a lot of those conversations this week. Like, what are you hearing? what are your suppliers telling you, reaching out to different vendors, and they're all telling me the same thing. Right now, I don't have anything major, but that could change. That could change in a month. That could change in 2 months, and it might. I would say that you have to do your best to try to bake that into the pie. It really depends on what. For example, you're hearing steel. If you're doing a new construction steel building, like you really have to be mindful of that. If we're doing a rehab, we really don't have so much of that to worry about. It's not so much going to affect us. So I think it's just trying to pay attention to the market and speaking to vendors and just trying to be a little more conservative maybe until things stabilize.
So now, I think we discussed a lot about construction, hard costs, vendors, relationships with them. Now that the building is complete, you guys are done with your renovation. How involved are you in the leasing and the sales once everything is ready to be leased or sold?
So good question, because we've talked a lot about different teams, right? But part of that equation, it really is the brokers, and there isn't a deal that we don't look at where we're calling a broker really early on and trying to get projections and comps and looking at what's been sold or rented. Again, it's like at this point we have some teams and people that we really like working with, and we lean on them for that. The good ones are really a part of the entire process. So they're telling you, again, like what I used to do, they are way better than what I used to do. But I remember telling the landlord, hey, you should do this little thing here, will help you rent it. They are doing that on like the highest level. So they're telling you how to get that product that really is going to work for that particular, let's say, that particular site, that particular location. And they're helping. This is the type of finish that you really should, be looking to do here. This is the type of floor plan, or this is the type of, different, let's say, unit mix that you should keep in mind. So they are as important as anybody else, and then going and they're with you throughout the entirety of the process, and that at the end, so I'm if there's any change, for example, I need to file an amendment. If it's major enough, if it's going to be a change, I'll speak to them first. Like, what do you think of this? Like, if we do this instead of that, like, how do you think that's going to play out here, right? And a lot that could fall into the decision making. And then at the end, I like to be there. I like to be there when they're renting and leasing. We have our initial projections, and like that's like sort of the eye on the prize. That could change by the time you get there.
Is there
We've done a pretty good job of beating those projections, and sometimes you end up not because of a market change or whatever. They're there the entire step of the way and into the lease up. And there's a strategy a lot of the times, but like I said, with the really good ones, they're helping you maximize the strategy of the lease up. Which one should go first? Which one shouldn't? Price setting, etc.
So one thing I always wondered, and I've seen this a lot, when you're interviewing multiple brokers, let's just say two, let's just say not more than two exactly. Oftentimes to beat one over the other one, they'll tell you that they can rent a unit for more than the other guy, just so they get that exclusive, just so that they can get their hands on the property. And once they bring it to market, then they'll deal with it. Do you have a system in place, or anybody on your team, or this could be you, that looks at it, it says, you know what, this is a little too aggressive. I don't know if we can get this. Is there are you at any point kind of cross-referencing comps yourself to see if they're accurate or not, or you fully lean on them 110%?
No, I think we do our own due diligence, right? And we'll do our own projections on construction timing, rents or sales, what we think based on what we're seeing. But then before we do anything, we're always bouncing that off someone that we're intending to work with, and just making sure that we're in line. Now, if you're speaking to multiple brokers, they're going to have different opinions. And like you said, a lot of times a broker will tell you what you want to hear just to sign you up, only to have those projections fall short. And sorry, I'm going to have to drop it here. But now we have an exclusive, and we have to. So you do have to be mindful of that. I tend to think most brokers are there to help you. Like, they're not really looking, out for themselves to that extent. But you do have to be mindful of that. But getting enough information, like speaking to enough brokers and doing that research and saying, and looking at it and having an eye and saying, if they're telling me it's going to be 5,000, but all I'm seeing is 4,000, you can deduce that they're aggressive. And I even asked them the question, like, is this a conservative outlook? what is this based on? Is this based on the prime season? Is this based on the, like, what is this? What is your projection based on? And then, just try and make an educated decision from what they're telling you.
Interesting. So one thing that me and Farouk discussed, when we do our projects and we just sold one, uh, we didn't get any emotional connection to a point where it's like, okay, it's our baby, we built it, and we're sad. What is your emotional connection to the buildings that you built and you develop when you are no longer, I guess, in their life? You sold them, and you have nothing to do with them anymore. Are you emotionally connected to any of the buildings that you've built?
For sure. For sure. So I definitely have, they're kind of like children for me, like you're sort of raising them. And, when we've sold, I like to take a picture of the now sold building and send it out. Like, oh, look, I definitely have an affinity for certain projects, certain buildings over the others, but I care about all of them. They are all my children. And, while it's part of the business, I'm sad to see them go sometimes, but, it's part of the process. I send them along their way. I wish them well. Fruitful adults.
Do you have one specific that you like over the other ones? If you had to pick one.
The next one.
The next one.
Okay.
That's a very politically correct answer. But one other question I would want to ask you on that train of thought is, do you get upset when you drive by a building that you used to own and the new owner hasn't taken care of it the way it should have been?
I haven't seen that to this point. Thankfully. But would I get upset? I probably would be upset. Like, just kind of seeing it deteriorate for sure.
I recall when you guys sold 356 West 48th Street, there was a time I think it may have been as soon as a week after you guys sold it, you were driving by, or was it 2 weeks after, and you told me you saw a fence broken or down, and that did upset you. So I'll call your BS right now.
That's true. That's true. I forgot about that one, but it upset me. Normally I'd be like reaching out like, hey guys, we need to fix this. I drove back, in front of it recently and the fence is fixed. So maybe they just needed a little time.
Otherwise, you would have had to take things into your own hand, go over there and fix it yourself.
I got my tools in the trunk.
How do
I
you?
wish them well.
Well, there's so many different things that go into a project. It's just a lot of work. It takes years, like literally years from the time you look at a project to the time you're done with it. In your eyes, what do you consider a successful project? Is it all about just making the most amount of money? How would you define success when it comes to a project specifically?
It definitely isn't all about making a lot of money. And while that's important and the goal of it, it's not the only thing. And I know a lot of developers focus on only that, and there's developers who care. I like to be in the care category where you are not just making money, but you're delivering a product that people love to live in, that adds to the neighborhood, right? Sometimes I see eyesores and I'm like, why did you build that? Or why did you choose this color? Like, it's just like, this doesn't add to the neighborhood. It's like an eyesore. So just keeping that in mind, like for just any random person just driving by, and look, like they're on their drive and they see a beautiful building and like, that looks nice,
Yeah.
right? I think it's part of that. Like I mentioned, the experience, it's really the experience for everybody. Even people that have nothing. I think if you focus on that, assuming you're executing and you're focusing on the experience, the money will take care of itself.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, these buildings are going to be standing there for a while, and some of them are going to be standing long after we're gone. And to your point about eyesores, sometimes we look at buildings and we literally see a finish on the facade that the developer maybe saved $5,000, but for that extra $5,000, that building would have looked that much better and would have been an addition to the neighborhood instead of an eyesore. And you asked 5,000.
What that decision was like, hey, which color do you have on set today? I'll pick
Right.
that one.
Yeah.
So again, there's a lot of great developers out there who are doing amazing stuff, and I'm like, wow, I want to do something like that. I just try to be in that category.
So speaking of, the stuff that you want to do next, looking ahead, what excites you the most? Because, we talked about where you kind of started doing the small projects, the 3-family, 6-family now, Manhattan projects, the latest project was 39 units that you guys are almost done with, and looking at even bigger stuff. What is the next step of your journey in this specific field that excites you the most? What are you chopping at the bits to do next?
So I think I think for us it's getting into ground up development, and we're starting some now. We have a few in the pipeline, and we're really excited about that. So it's doing exactly what we've been doing, but just from scratch, and it's exciting. And we're looking at things of different sizes, and just doing something special. Like again, just having that same mentality would go great here. And just keeping that in mind, like, well, in 10, 20 years, like having that there. Again, as a developer, you have to be in the spreadsheet, and it has to make sense, and it has to make money. But just having that, what excites me is just having something there that we created as a group and being proud of it. I think that's the biggest thing. And for us, ground up development is that, and even on the rehab standpoint, we're doing a lot of condos, and even rehabs on condos, not just ground up. That stuff excites me, and just doing something special for somebody, who's going to live there long term, their forever home, so to speak. I think it allows for a lot more creativity in these different things. So that's what I'm really most excited about, is just kind of flexing the creative muscles.
A lot of developers, and George had this answer. He said, "I want to change the New York City skyline." And then Jeff stole his dream and kind of added to it. Do you have any overly ambitious goals like that, or is it for you, it doesn't need to be a skyscraper? I just want to create beautiful projects that make the investors happy, that make the people who live there happy. Do you have any specific dream in mind where you'll be at 65 years old or 70 and you look back and say, "Yeah, I did this"? Does that something look? Is there visual attached to that?
Really, that's a deep question. It's not one I've thought about before, and I should spend some time on that. But for me, like changing the skyline, it sounds super exciting. Is it like my dream? It's not something that I focus on. I really treat each project like exactly the same. So it's I remember to start, like I only had a very small percentage in this for the first couple of projects, major owner. But I treated it as if I was like 100%. And it doesn't matter what project we do, whether I'm, tiniest percentage or a very large percentage, I treat it exactly the same. So whether it's the skyscraper or the three family, I just focus on that particular project and doing a good job. Looking back, yes, I would like to look back and say, I, added to the neighborhoods, I added to the neighborhoods, and people are living in them. I like going into open houses and just seeing the feedback, seeing the person who's going to live there. Like, what are they saying about it? Like that stuff is exciting. So whether it's a 3-unit building in Bed-Stuy or an 80-story building that changes the skyline, like it would excite me just to see people enjoying it.
Interesting. Would you say that something that, through the next 10 years is multifamily condos is where you want to kind of stay in, or do you see yourself coming out of that shell and maybe doing hospitality or retail? Do you see yourself going outside of the current asset classes that you guys are targeting?
I do. I think just seeing how things are fluid, and we're always evolving, and I think I'd be foolish to say that what we're doing today or in the direction we're going in now is going to be fixed forever. That, again, just going back to excitement, it would be exciting to do something different. For me, one thing that I can think of is doing a project that has, amenity spaces, a good amount of amenity spaces, something that adds to the experience outside of the apartment. Like, that's something different. So something different could be fun, and what would be really cool is to do this stuff like New York City, out of the US.
Is out of the country, does it have to be Greece or it can be something else?
Well, I have some connections in Azerbaijan.
I would love that.
Something really cool there.
It's funny you mentioned, because right now, actually, there's major development that's happening there. One of the guys there, he's building tremendous properties. He's kind of like copying himself over what Dubai did. So he's doing Palm Islands in the shape of a crescent.
So cool.
Yeah, it's when we were in Dubai and we saw that Museum of Science, that beautiful structure. So the same architect is going to be building a similar structure, like a unique structure, super tall structure for this project.
That's so cool.
So
Is it the one that looked like a coffee
You guys are
bean?
going to give us a tour, basically. Like, we're still waiting on that. that home
Yeah,
tour.
yeah, Farouk, exactly. That the one that looked like a coffee bean. That same architect.
I actually regret not going to that one. I think we did a lot there, but we should have found time to go to that one next time. There's always a next time.
We'll go to the
Oh, that's a good point.
And on that note, Tommy, I want to thank you. I know you, even though it's a Friday, you're still very busy and you have things to finish up. Thank you for giving us this time and opening up on some of the things that, where you came from, where you are now, and where you're going to be going, and some of the things that people don't know about you, and opening up to that. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you guys for having me. And I want to say I love you guys and people who are listening. These guys are two of the best guys you could ever meet. Keep coming back. Keep listening. They're worth
Thank
it.
you. Can we next time start the podcast with that? Were you saying that?
Because some
I
people
don't know how many people are gonna be.
by now, so we should probably start with that.
I know. I don't know how many people are gonna be here. An hour, 5 minutes in.
Bro, so what you do is you cut the ending and you just put it in the front as a
Oh
teaser,
yeah, I'll
and
just
then
make it a trailer. That's right.
exactly,
And then
exactly.
just keep it repetitive every 10
And then
minutes.
it's
I'm
gonna
gonna have
be,
the
and
same
it's gonna
clip.
be a prerequisite for every guest going forward that the first minute to 2 minutes is you have to express love and devotion to the host.
I think it's a good marketing strategy. Is
Absolutely.
welcome to the show. What do you love about us?
That's a phenomenal idea. I don't see why it can't work.
I think you should try it. Trial
Yes.
and error.
Of course.
Yeah.
All right, Tommy. Thank you so much, and we'll see you when we're in New York very soon.
Well, maybe when I come down there, hopefully soon.
Take care.
All right. See you guys.